The Trump administration held a closed-door briefing with congressional leadership yesterday to answer questions about potential next steps in Iran. During the meeting, Secretary of State Marco Rubio told lawmakers that Israel's determination to attack Iran and the certainty that U.S. troops would be targeted in the Iranian response forced the White House to launch the preemptive strikes. That reasoning drew divided responses from the top members of Congress who were in attendance. Joining us now, the ranking member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, who was in that meeting yesterday with Secretary Rubio, Senator Jeanne Shaheen of New Hampshire. She also serves on the Senate Armed Services Committee. Senator, thank you so much for being with us this morning. Let's start there in that briefing, and I'm sure there are elements of it, of course, you can't discuss publicly, but let's zero in on that argument, because we heard it from Secretary of State Rubio later to reporters as well, suggesting, to the disbelief of many, that Israel had decided it was going to attack Iran, and therefore the U.S., fearing the repercussions, felt like, well, we might as well jump in on that. That raised the eyebrows of many here in the United States.
I think it's fair to say that there's real concern about who's really controlling America's foreign policy. Is it President Trump or is it Prime Minister Netanyahu? And the reality is there was no response to the question about whether we tried to dissuade Israel from making those attacks into Iran. There's no question that having the Ayatollah gone is a good thing, because he was a promoter of terrorism across the Middle East. He repressed his own people, killed thousands last month when they were demonstrating in the streets. But the rationale from this administration for both what the strategy is, what the end game is, and why we made these attacks now is not clear at all.
Yes, Senator, certainly the president himself, in a series of phone calls with reporters, has offered different motivations for why he gave the green light here. But let's pivot to what happens now, or should I say what happens next. Was it communicated at all what the end game here is, what the exit strategy or off-ramp might be for this U.S. military operation in Iran, which the president himself says could be 4, 5, 6 weeks?
Well, what we heard yesterday in the press conference from Secretary Hegseth was the military goals of these strikes. What the president has said has been something different, so we've heard mixed messages again coming out of this administration. You know, it's also very concerning that we have 14 countries that the State Department has said Americans should evacuate from. In the region, in those countries, we only have 4 confirmed ambassadors. So we're over a year into this administration. We only have 4 confirmed ambassadors to be able to tell us what's happening as the result of these strikes. And we had 3 of the countries that are hardest hit where the administration recalled the career ambassadors late last year. So we're really flying blind in a number of these countries. And the 40,000 Americans who Secretary Rubio says are in the region are military Americans who are in those countries, have no one who can provide them with any real information about what's going on.
Senator Shaheen, Jackie Alemany here. Obviously, we have all heard at this point that Donald Trump and his Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, are open to boots on the ground. It's an open question, and they said that depending on the circumstances, that might be something that needs to happen. There are a number of your Democratic colleagues who have signaled that they're going to vote against a war powers resolution whenever that may come to the floor for a vote. Do you believe that a vote against war powers resolution?
Jackie, I think the plan, what you're hearing from them is that they're going to vote for the control that Congress should have on whether to declare war or not.
But for some of your Democratic colleagues, people like John Fetterman, Josh Gottheimer, people who are signaling that they're going to vote against being able to rein in Trump, is that vote the equivalent to giving the president a free pass on sending troops to Iran and putting boots on the ground?
Well, I hope not. I think it would be a mistake for us to put boots on the ground in Iran. We've lived through what happened in Afghanistan, what happened in Iraq, the number of lives lost the failure of that regime change and the effort to impose on the people of those countries what America thinks. The future of Iran needs to be determined by the Iranian people. And sadly, airstrikes have not had a history of being able to adequately produce regime change. I think the founding fathers set up the Congress as the body that should determine whether to declare war or not, because they didn't want the leader of this country to turn into a despot or an autocrat who was going to make decisions without the will of the people. And that's why I think it's important for Congress to resume its authority over declaring war.
Ranking member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Democratic Senator Jeanne Shaheen of New Hampshire. Senator, thank you so much for joining us this morning.